Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to risk management, resilience, business continuity, well-being, COVID, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. One quick announcement. I will be giving a keynote speech at Business Continuity Institute's, what do they call it this year?
BCI World.
BCI World, but they've got a hybrid world or something like that this year. November 2nd and 3rd, anyway. And I'll be presenting with Margaret Millett, and we'll actually be in person. So I'm looking forward to that. As you can see, it is that time again. James Green, welcome back for another edition of This Week in Business Continuity.
Thanks, Alex. Happy to be here as always. I forgot to mention you, my son last week rightfully pointed out, we call it This Week in Business Continuity, but we only meet once a month. So he wanted to know if that mistake was on purpose or accidental. Always getting the love from my family in our endeavors.
We did it on purpose.
See? There you
we
go.
We knew what we were doing.
That's right. Always.
And I'm sticking to it. So we have an agenda of things to touch on. And one of the first things you wanted to talk about was something that happened big here in Canada, the Rogers outage.
Yeah. So on July 8th, your entire country went offline. And you and I were supposed to meet that day. You're a very prompt, punctual person, and you fell off the grid. And it took me about an hour before I noticed that people were freaking out on social media that Rogers, cell phone, cable, internet,
TV, everything.
Smoke signal, TV, your whole country went offline. And that's terrifying to me, that all comms for one country are kind of run by a single company. So take me through what happened to you that day, what your thoughts have been since then, and then what are people like? If I were a security company or the government, I'd really be freaking out that the country went down. That seems like a bad BC plan.
If there was one. First of all, it wasn't the entire country.
Okay.
There are three big providers in Canada, and I'm not going to promote them here, but Rogers is just one of them. So we had over a third of the country go down.
Okay, so only a third of
coast to coast to coast.
We lost a third of Canada, which is still.
However,
okay,
to build on that, because of the interdependencies with Rogers, there was a huge amount of non-Rogers customers who were impacted. So that's where you might feel, might have heard the entire country felt, impacted, because it kind of felt that way. So you want to know what happened?
I would love to.
The interesting thing is, where I live in Guelph, that Friday, we had a power outage in the morning for whatever reason. I never did find out why. I woke up at 5 a.m. Power was out, and I went, no big deal. It'll come on when it comes on. And it was still too early for me to even try to log into work, because I thought, I'm not going to log in this early. I've got time. I didn't bother checking my phone, because I thought, well, no, I'm up going to make some tea, walk the dog, get something to eat. Then I'll check all that stuff.
Yeah.
So after a while, I went without checking anything or turning anything on, or trying to turn anything on. I went down to walk the dog first. Came outside and I said, "Oh, lovely power outage we've got," to my neighbor, and she turned around and said, "Well, and Rogers is all down." That's when I found out, oh, this is worse. They're down too. Oh, maybe it's a part of the power outage. A couple of hours later, power comes back on. Phone doesn't work, because I've checked that. Internet doesn't work. I have internet TV as well. I am a Rogers customer, so nothing works for me at all. And hence your point, I couldn't even reach out to you through my phone, through any other provider, nothing, to let you know that I wasn't going to make what was it, a 9 a.m. call or something you and I had, and I couldn't be there. Couldn't send a note, nothing. Couldn't reach anybody. If I had an issue with Rogers, because everything was down, I couldn't even submit a ticket or call them to find out that I had an issue, to tell them I had an issue or what the status was. Couldn't get any of that information. And obviously, they couldn't send out communications to us, customers, to tell them that there was an issue. So tons of us were just literally left in the dark. We had no idea what was going on. Luckily, power came on, at about 10 a.m. or so. So at least I had that going for me. But no internet, no phone, nothing. My cell phone isn't with Rogers. However, it is with a company that Rogers owns. So Rogers originally bought this company years ago because of the technology that this provider had. Well, it made no difference when they had their issue, because even their subsidiaries didn't have any service either. So, and they own a couple of other smaller cell companies. It turns out what caused it was a problem with a code change. It was a regular maintenance going on. So I feel really bad for the one person who probably hit the button to upload this new code or change the code. But it brought up a lot of questions, and this is what's being asked of Rogers now by the government and many other regulators is, well, how robust is your change management process?
It can't be.
Did you even do it? And I had the thought that, because it was part of a regular maintenance, I bet you it's just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just go through the motions. We do this every month or every week, whatever. So who cares? It doesn't matter. And some little change was made, uploaded, and it just crashed everything. Then when the contingency they had in place was supposed to reroute traffic to another router so that information would still go on, but that got so overloaded it broke down. So now nothing is going on. The CTO resigned, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. That's the first move in DR, right? Fire somebody.
So he was replaced right almost within a day or two. It was gone. Some of the other impacts that happened is not people that trying to reach 911 for emergencies couldn't get through because 911 wouldn't work for them because it was part of all their Rogers. So hospitals were having problems and being impacted, and first responders were being impacted. Some of the Interac payment systems and credit card systems that are used in stores, people found themselves in lineups at grocery stores that were there, suddenly couldn't pay for groceries because the systems were down, and they said, we're only accepting cash. Okay, well then I'll pay with debit. No, that's down. So people were left, well, all I've got is a $5 bill in my hand, and $200 in groceries in a cart. And going, well, I can't buy anything then. So that was happening all over the place. And there was a talk of what they're going to do is give all their Rogers customers 5 days free service. That's how they'll reimburse us. Okay, that's fine. I'll take that. But it kind of shatters my confidence in what they're going to do going forward. Now they've said they've told the government that they are going to invest $10 billion, I think, over a few years to redo all their back end so that it becomes more robust and more resilient, and things fail over more, and they don't have the routing issue and all this and that. But we'll see what happens.
And what happens if you call 911, or if you're a business owner, what happens in the next few years while they're working on that plan?
Yeah. Is it going to happen again? If a regular maintenance went through and caused this, and I still think, whether they say it or not, that change management wasn't properly followed. And if change management wasn't followed, then at least QA should have been able to catch the error in the code or something. But so it seems a whole bunch of different things happened or didn't happen, I should say, the way they should have. And now, who knows what's going to happen if there's going to be another outage. How many more people are going to suffer in a hospital or trying to, a car accident, all of a sudden you can't get through on 911. So it's had a lot of people I know, a couple I know, that have left Rogers and gone over to one of the competitors already. So I don't know what Rogers is going to do in the future and how they're going to get their reputation and build their brand back. Because right now they're not looking too reliable. And the FYI, I think they still are trying to buy another telecommunications company here in Canada. Well, that people are kind of going, I don't think you should do that because, that's kind of one of the companies we now want to switch to. To get away from you. We don't want you buying this company now. And regulators are starting to look at it too, going, well, if you can't handle what you've got now, why should we approve you buying another telecommunications company? So
yeah, it's going to be really interesting to me over the next few years if telecom and internet providers become public utilities where it's just deemed essential like power companies are. And you see last year with all the outages in Texas because they had chosen to uncouple from the rest of the national grid. And with the Rogers outage, I mean, that could have been truly catastrophic to take a third of Canada and say, you have no type of comms, internet, TV, television, payment systems, nothing. Like that is, pick a word you want to use that's usually too hyperbolic, catastrophic, cataclysmic. There could have been much more profound life safety impacts. And I wonder if there'll be some changes with what happened with Rogers. And then, late last year, you and I spoke about Canada's inability to produce its own COVID vaccinations and having to rely on other countries. Like, I wonder if some of these things are going to converge into like, hey, we need to be more resilient as a country because here are two things that happened that are not good and that you had, if you're the government or you're a citizen, you had no control over.
Yeah. Well, the COVID medicines, they are building a factory plant in, I think it's outside of Montreal, so that we can manufacture our own vaccines and things like that. So that was a good thing. One of the recommendations that I wouldn't say mandated, but very strongly recommended that services like 911, if Rogers, for example, has an issue, that service should automatically switch over to one of the other two service providers. And the same thing. So the three of them, have that, especially with things like 911 and hospitals and anything to do with that kind of level of, public safety and, need.
Yeah, that should be deemed critical infrastructure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes over the next few years. There's still a lot of ill will, obviously, hanging around. And I think it's going to be with Rogers. It's going to be around there, like a noose around their neck kind of thing. Or
and 5 days of service. If I was trying to call 911 right then, I don't care about 5 days of service. That's not appropriate compensation. Yeah,
there were stories. I don't know if you always hear, anytime something happens, you always hear these other stories, but never hear the actual outcome at the end. So I'm not sure if they were true stories or just people, jumping in to try and, get people to pay attention to what they're saying. But apparently there were one or two incidents where people were really needing 911 services. and they kind of had to bundle people up in the car and just race
Yeah.
to a hospital because they couldn't get through on 911. They couldn't get the paramedics to show up. So,
Yeah.
couldn't
And
reach them, I should say.
you unfortunately expect that during an actual disaster, but not due to a weak CMDB or weak
Yeah.
change management. That's just crazy to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I've worked with those teams before, especially in my project management days. And no, that should never have happened. Never have happened, but for whatever reason, it did. We got through it at least.
Well,
And there's going to be a lot of lessons learned and a lot of changes happening.
Exactly. Well, our friends in Australia might have a solution. As the audience knows, I love to send you standards and papers. And there's the second big, I'm calling it the second big operational resilience standard is here after the Bank of England opera standard. We now have CPS 230 in Australia, their operational risk management. Draft standard was released in July. They're looking for comments through October 21st. I sent you the standards like a kid on Christmas on the 28th.
Yep.
So you made an amazing comment when we were off mic. I'd love you to start with that. What was your first impression? You were telling me about the title page.
Well, I read the title page, and to me, it's business continuity management. I could take out operational risk management, put in the words business continuity management, and it reads exactly the same. I didn't see anything that distinguished this, at least on the objectives, which is the main page, that separated it out from something to really stand out. And I just went, I've read this before, 100 times, and it's business continuity management.
I agree with you. I'm one of those people who people say, our operational resilience and business continuity the same thing. I'm one of those people who says, no, they are not the same thing. But in this case, for this standard, yes, they are the same thing.
Yeah.
And the reason we're talking about this is because I really felt now that there's a second standard by a large jurisdiction. You've got, the Bank of England, you've got Australia. These are not very tiny countries. It means the third one's coming. The fourth one's coming. If you're in the audience or you're Alex or myself, we're not in England or Australia at the moment. This will come to your jurisdiction. And if you're in a heavily regulated industry like a financial industry, financial services, insurance, you're going to have another standard to comply with in the next 5 years.
Yeah,
probably. And so my first question to you is, do these standards for you, do they mitigate risk or increase resilience? Not a loaded question at all.
I don't think they mitigate risk. I think the only way you mitigate risk is to actually sit there and, with a group and you talk about it. Here's our risk. How do we mitigate it? Writing it in a standard isn't going to be able to do that. I don't think, especially when, sure, banks have a lot of similarities, but they also do have different cultures and, have their fingers in different industries and investments. So some of their risks aren't going to be the same. So I don't think you can just have a cookie cutter all the way across and say, hey, this standard will fix all your risks or help you mitigate all the risks. I don't think that's doable, really. And the second part, sorry, now it just went out of my head.
Do you think this standard will increase resilience for organizations in Australia?
No, I think what it'll end up doing is creating another tick box exercise, because there are so many standards now that are already out there. And this is only the second one of its kind, and there's going to be more.
Yep.
Well, you add so much more of these in there, and after a while, we're going to start seeing competing standards, standards that give different views on things, and come from different angles. And after a point, it's going to be difficult for regular Joes like you and I to actually do our jobs. And these things are going to start turning out to be tick box exercises. And I don't think it helps create resilience, because you need people to do that, to create that resilience. And the resilience comes from the culture. Well, the standard can't dictate what your organizational culture is going to be, and I would love to see somebody attempt that, but I don't think that's going to ever bear fruit in any way. So I don't think standards help in either one of those situations. They may offer some bits and pieces that you can take to that you might be able to adopt and say, hey, I hadn't thought about that piece before. But overall, I don't think, if you're following an ISO standard already for risk management, well then, and that's a global standard, well then why are you wanting to follow this one? Why do I have to change things to adapt to this one?
Yeah, one thing I worry about as more resilient standards get adopted is that we become even more of a compliance function, in terms of, if you're a global company,
Yeah.
all the different privacy and data laws, that's a whole function in and of itself, just making sure you meet all 4,000 standards across the globe, or
Yeah.
or whatever it is. It's like you have teams and software literally developed and devoted just to making sure we comply with all these different standards. And that takes so much time and energy that nobody has time to sit back and say, is this meaningful? Are
Yeah.
we meaningfully protecting PII and our customer data? No, the whole focus is just, are we not going to get in trouble? And I worry about in our field, will we go that way if there's a different standard for Canada and the United States and UK and the European Union and Australia and Singapore and on and on? You are going to need a software just to be in compliance with BCE resilience standards. And then it becomes a much more data-driven, in a negative way, job and profession.
Yeah, and who's going to actually be able to do what needs to get done when you're spending all your time on
Nobody.
just trying to meet
It's
compliance?
Yeah.
We aren't a huge industry. We're not like engineering or construction workers, or where there's a bigger pool of people. We don't have that. And if we are focused all on compliance and audit, then who's actually doing things?
Nobody.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you.
I wanted to ask you, you said there were two things that stood out to you.
Yes.
We've been bashing this standard for 10 minutes. My apologies to the Australian government, but you said there were two things that stood out to you. Hopefully they were positive. I'd love to hear what they were.
One was positive and one was kind of, oh, that's interesting. It does call out, I just got to flip to the page. It does call out the role of the board of an organization.
Nice.
In general, when you see standards, it kind of talks about roles and responsibilities, and it just kind of says, make sure you identify the roles and responsibilities for these groups, and they know what they're doing and testing, and make sure you have all this in place. This one actually comes out and says the role of the board, and then gives a whole bunch of things that the board itself needs to do and make sure they do, which I thought was interesting, because a lot of times it's senior management, leadership, and then it's communicate to the board. This one goes right to the board level. So I
like that. And I think that's if you are going to try and drive change through a standard, through a regulation, I love that. Put true responsibility on the board, and not, to your point, communicate to the board once a year during the 15-second risk committee meeting. So
if you get 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And in that area, by the way, it also said approve the BCPs and tolerance levels at the board, which I thought, because usually we're people like you and I, we end up talking with the user and the manager.
Yep.
But this is like, however many steps up to the board. Oh, that's interesting.
All the way, all the steps.
Yeah. So I thought, that's rather interesting. So that was one. The other is actually mentioned in a footnote. And I
Then I
thought,
missed that. I
oh,
missed that. I'll tell you right now. I didn't read the footnotes reading through HARPA.
I thought this was rather interesting because any organization can activate a BCP for any reason. It doesn't have to be something major. It could be something small, whatever the situation could be. But the footnote says an entity must have a number of BCPs. A BCP may include separate crisis management plans and disaster recovery plans. Do you know how many people I've talked to on this show that says the more plans you have, the more confusing it is, the more harder it is to monitor, the harder it is to test, the harder it is to get buy-in. And then this one comes straight out and says you should have a whole bunch.
It is. I have a client. I wish I could share their name and their plan. They have the most beautiful crisis management plan I've ever seen. It's a work of art, but it's 80 pages. It's beautiful. They've never used it, but it should be in a museum. So I completely agree with you. You don't have, assuming the emergency is a scenario you've already thought of. How are you gonna, we got to activate our BCP, we've got our CMP, we've got our DRP. In the US, you're supposed to have an emergency action plan. Like yeah. So a standard that requires more documents, I don't think that mitigates risk or increases resilience.
And the second part of that one is, as I mentioned, you could activate your plan under any circumstance. It could be something small, could be something large. A small outage of an application out for an hour. Okay, we've got contingencies in place to deal with that. You're activating part of your plan. But this calls out an APRA regulated entity must notify APRA, which is the standard, as soon as possible and no later than 24 hours if it has activated its BCP. So am I going to be told now that if I have a small outage with my application, I have to notify this big government agency and end up with all these lessons learned meetings and all these other stuff just because I activated a small little piece of a contingency plan?
Well, what's going to happen? You're going to see companies never activate their plans unless it's on the news.
Yeah.
So anything short of that, they're going to say, no, we didn't activate. We didn't activate. I know there was a fire. We didn't activate. So I think it's going to drive things the other way.
Yeah. So those are the things that jumped out at me, at the first read. And as I say, a lot of the other stuff just came across as that's a rewording of a risk assessment, a rewording of a business continuity management methodology. That's a rewording of a BIA. Outside of what I mentioned, nothing else really seemed new or different.
Well, if you're in Australia, you have until October 21st to comment. Please do. And Alex, I guess you and I will revisit this whenever it goes live. We'll see if it's the same or different, just like the Bank of England standard, very different draft compared to go live and the timing of it. So it'll be interesting to see. I always like standards like this. Is it 2027? Is it 27 never? Like when's it actually matter?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what comes of this. And in the meantime, how many others get released? Because I'm sure there has to be. Exactly. If the UK and Australia have it, then the other G7 countries are going to have it.
Correct.
Even just as a starting point, they're going to have it. So let's move on to the next one. You had something announcement for the Resilience Think Tank.
Yeah. So this actually ties into something you said a few minutes ago about our profession and where are people coming from. So the Resilience Think Tank this quarter, the spotlight is on the next generation of resilience professionals. So we're doing spotlights on rising stars in the industry, up and comers on the industry. But given what you said earlier, I'd love your opinions on like how and where is the next generation of our profession coming from? Because our profession is predominantly, honestly, white men in their 40s and 50s. And someday we hope to retire. And I'd like to see our profession not go away. So I'd love to get some of your thoughts on, what do we need to do to to attract or proactively, bring people into our profession, that next generation.
When I first read this on our agenda, the first thing that came to my mind is something I had said before. I can't remember if it was with yourself, James, or if it was a little video I did for the channel, but it had to do with stop self-congratulating ourselves with Business Continuity Awareness Week. But who's our target audience? Us. So Business Continuity Awareness Week,
I'm already aware.
We should be targeting other people. Go send a communication to universities, that have courses along, business continuity or emergency management or something along that lines. Target them. Don't target me. I already know what a BIA is and, testing and all this other stuff. That's how we need to get people into the industry. I don't think targeting ourselves and having a BCI awareness week for ourselves is going to bring people in. It's kind of isolating ourselves. And I think sometimes and because we just talked about standards too, with too many standards, we end up contradicting ourselves. Like this industry's got standards all over the place. There's different methodologies and they can't agree on terminology. They don't get the audience with the C-suite, and half the time the C-suite has no idea what business continuity is anyway. So if I want to move up into the business continuity world because I may find it interesting, I'm going to look and say, but it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't move up the ladder. It doesn't get the prestige that maybe sales or marketing or communications director might get, or something that executives know and understand. And maybe that's part of the issue we need to deal with as well. If we want to bring people in, we got to change what we're already doing ourselves to promote ourselves, not just amongst ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I was thinking of in the United States, the credit union industry has Credit Union Awareness Day, but they don't target, to your point, people who are already a member of credit union. The audience is people who don't even know what a credit union is. And that really kind of struck me when you talked about Business Continuity Awareness Week. You've been involved in that. I've been involved with that. But again, the audience for those messages are people who are already aware of business continuity.
Yeah.
So we need to target people who've never heard of business continuity, who don't know what resilience is, risk management, any of it. I think that's so important, because I think we want to look for the next generation, just also not in terms of age, but there's a lot of people, the great resignation right now, there's a lot of people changing careers. And I would doubt almost none of them are thinking, oh, maybe what Alex and James do, I could consider that, because we're not good at advertising except to ourselves.
Yeah. And because of that, that's probably one reason why executives aren't as aware either. So you never see that career path to get there. If I start off as an operational resilience analyst or business continuity plan specialist or whatever, where do I go from there?
Nowhere, unfortunately, for a lot of companies.
Yeah. If I want to go up, I got to go out.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, we need to change that to make it look like sorry, let me change that. I don't mean make it look like, to show that there is a path that to increase your knowledge and your title and your salary and things like that. There are things you can do, and we don't seem to be doing a very good job at that. And to your point, it's all the 40, 50-year-old that are going to be retiring soon.
Yeah. And that's going to open a huge, not just hole, but I think gap. There's a lot of institutional knowledge in our profession that is on the backside of our careers. And what happens, we're focused on business continuity, and part of that is succession planning and not being single point of failures, but we also are single points of failures at times.
We talk about it, but we're not actually doing something about it.
Yeah, I would love
You
to
know?
see, to your point, a BC Awareness Week campaign of what is BC, what is this profession geared not towards us.
Yeah. I mentioned, target universities, colleges. You go to at least I don't know if it still happens. Maybe you could ask your son this. But you used to have when a class was coming close to graduating, you'd have visits at your high school by
Yeah.
various colleges and universities. At least I did. I don't know if it still happens, but I know I did. And I got to talk to people and find out what they did. And they talked about the various things that were out there and where you wanted to go. They had all that information. It's business continuity management or resilience, whatever terminology. If you can get that into the hands of universities so that they get on board with this kind of thing, then we can start pulling in some of these really young new people with completely fresh ideas who haven't been tainted by performing 300 BIAs that just make you pull out your hair. That's the way we could really bring in some new talent, new ideas, fresh ideas, and they're not tainted by anything.
Yeah, and I am seeing over the last 5 years university programs in the United States around emergency management, but that's
Mhm.
geared towards people who want to go public sector. Maybe we need to start degree programs for people who want to work in our field in the private sector. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
someday
good
you
idea.
could go to Alex Fullick University or but yeah, I'm seeing more and more emergency management public sector education tracks, but not private sector. And I'm not talking like the certificate program at MIT, but true undergraduate degrees. So maybe we should link up with the university and work on that.
Yeah, I agree. And well, it'll be interesting to see because I'm, you know, I've said enough. I'm not going to say more. I've said enough. So our next one is what did you call it? Lightning round?
Lightning round. So
What do
I
we
have
have
a
in store?
confession to make. I want to talk to you a bit about business books. I always get recommended, hey, you should read this business book. You should read that business book. I buy them. I get halfway through. They're the books I'm most likely not able or interested in finishing. So I don't know if that's on me, but as you know, I read biographies, I read all kinds of stuff. But when it comes to business books, it's a tough slog for me. So I thought it'd be fun. Recently, MIT Sloan Management Review had 8 business books to challenge your thinking. I have never read any of these. So I'd be curious really quick if you've read them or even heard of them. And this is not disparaging to the authors of these books. I think this is just where my kind of mind frame, headspace, pick a word, is. So the first one is Subtract: The Untapped Science of Less.
No,
Good Arguments: How Debate Teaches Us to Listen and Be Heard.
no,
You might like that one. This one, very long title. The 4-Day Work Week: How the Flexible Work Revolution Can Increase Productivity, Profitability, and Well-Being and Create a Sustainable Future.
nope.
I tend to think the longer the title, the weaker the book. The Power of Flexing: How to Use Small Daily Experiments to Create Big Life-Changing Growth.
Nope. I'm not
Access
doing good.
Rules. Access Rules: Freeing Data from Big Tech for a Better Future.
Nope.
The Earned Life: Lose Regret, Choose Fulfillment.
Nope.
2 more. Redesigning Work: How to Transform Your Organization and Make Hybrid Work for Everyone. Very timely.
Nope.
And The Digital Mindset: What It Really Takes to Thrive in the Age of Data, Algorithm, and AI.
And no, I haven't read
All
any
right,
of
so
those.
we're both 0 for 8 there. What is your thought? You're a voluminous reader. What are your thoughts on books focused on the business world? I know you read more of them than I do, which is close to 0. But
Well,
where are they in your pile?
the true business books tend to kind of drop down the pile.
Yeah.
Out of these 8 books, there's 2 that are I would kind of classify as a little bit of self-help type thing, looking inside.
Yeah.
Those ones would be an interest of me, most definitely, and I probably would reach out and have a look at 2 of these books on this list. But true business stuff tends to drop down, and I think that's because that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So even though there's some great insights in all of them, and I'm not knocking a single business book, I tend to look at things that are going to help with what I do and help me myself, because I can read a book, but if I'm not feeling it, I'm not going to learn from it. So
Exactly.
I like to read something to make me want to learn from that book. So I have to read something else first, to be able to get in that mindset. And
Yeah.
I always have a bunch of books on the go at any given time.
Yeah, and I find the business books, I'm initially excited when I buy them, and then when I go finish book and I go and grab what's supposed to be the next book I read, those books kind of always move
Yep.
down this shelf, off the shelf. So I would love to hear from your audience if there's a business book that has rocked your world, changed your life, that we have to read. Share it with us. I'd love to hear.
Yeah,
Love to
I would
hear.
love. But do you have what are you reading now? Put it that way.
I actually have it. I usually forget, and they're off. So I'm gonna change my background here so you can see me. So I just started reading this week. It's called Legacy of Ashes: The History of the CIA by a gentleman, Tim Weiner. Very fascinating book. Right now I'm in the origins of the necessity for the United States Central Intelligence Agency came from World War II ended. The US shut down its spy machine, but the USSR did not. And there was a huge gap right away. The US had primarily relied on and historically relied on the UK for intelligence, and the UK, being devastated by World War II, had other things to focus on. So in the initial part of this book, the US found itself far behind its new chief competitor, I guess, and completely unprepared, to coin a BC frame. They had no idea where to start and what to do, and were just kind of throwing money at stuff to see if it worked, and most of it did not. So, interesting book.
Well, the current one I'm reading is Roar. How to build a resilient organization the world famous San Diego Zoo way.
Oh wow! See, now that's a business book I want to read.
Yeah, I've only just started, so I don't have any opinion on it yet.
I love that too. Have you been to the San Diego Zoo?
Yes, I loved it. I had a guide who was at night a stand-up comedian.
Oh, nice.
So that tour was just amazing. We couldn't stop laughing the entire time. I loved it. I still remember it to this day, and that was 20 years ago. It was just amazing. And then the 2 books I just finished. One is by Ralph Klein, who's been on the show a couple of times. Management Lessons from the Great Explorers. He's actually going to come on the show and talk about some of the lessons learned about risk management, team building, and things like that. So he's going to come on. And I just finished David Lindsted's. It took a while to arrive for some reason.
Oh, is that his new book?
That's his new book, Building Resilient Organizations Through Change, Chance, and Complexity. So there was some interesting points in here as well. So well done. So that's what I'm reading right now. Oh, and there's a fantasy book somewhere in the house that's halfway through.
Nice.
So I don't think we want to give away details, but James and I might have a special announcement next month. Shall we say next month?
Yeah, if you've made it to the I don't know where we're at. We're closing in on 45 minutes or so. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for still being with us. But yeah, we have something big that is definitely happening, and we will be announcing probably next month. So I'm looking forward to that very, very exciting
Mhm.
pipe dream that we've made a reality.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So look forward to that announcement because we'll be saying it a lot once it
Yes.
happens. That's for sure.
Yes, we will.
So, James, any final thoughts before we end this episode?
No, I think another episode in the books. I'm excited. We've been doing this, I don't know how long now, but I think one time, the conversation you and I have before we go on the air, we should maybe record that and just put that out.
That could be dangerous.
That might be
Regina
problematic.
Regina Phelps and I have said the same thing. She said, that could be dangerous if we
Yeah.
recorded some of that.
Maybe
Well,
maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe next time. Who knows? James, thanks again for another great chat. And of course, we're going to be talking a lot more over the next little while. So, but until next month, everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.